I tell you, you kids these days don't know how good you've got it when it comes to video games, the technology, the graphics. It's mind-blowing. Me, I've always been a big fan of the sports games. I remember as a kid growing up in the early 90s, I had the Sega Genesis, and I played all of the sports franchises back then. In the years before Madden football became the phenomenon that it was and still is to this day, there was an OG of the football franchises that had the announcer calling the plays, and that was the appropriately named NFL Sports Talk Football. And I'm going to specifically talk about the two of these games that I had. That was NFL Sports Talk Football 93 and then NFL Football 94 starring Joe Montana. For those of you younger that have no idea about these franchises of this game, you have no idea how impressive they were to a kid that was 15, 16 years old. Just to be able to have it sound more like a regular football game you'd watch on TV with the announcer calling the plays and the action that was happening, it was wild. So with Sports Talk Football 93, you'd put that cartridge in the Sega Genesis and turn it on, and then you'd hear this.
NFL Sports Talk Football.
As with any sporting game, you could play exhibition, you could play a season mode. That's all they had back then. But even the graphics were good with the cool helmets with the team logos on them. Of course, it was one or two players. This game came out in 1992. Sports Talk Football 93 did. And back then, the New England Patriots, my home team, they were terrible. They were a laughingstock of football. So I basically never wanted to be them. I was a Detroit Lions fan, a Barry Sanders fan. I'll keep saying this game was very advanced for the time. You had a playbook that had 50 plays. You could choose different camera views. You could do the view from the blimp, which was so funny. You'd just be looking down and there'd just be dots on the field. Like there was no way you could play like that. The commentary used something called Sports Talk 2.0 technology, which used roughly around 500 different phrases. What blew my mind when researching this game for the podcast is that the voice that did those 500 phrases was a real person, a man named Lon Simmons, who was the play-by-play announcer for the San Francisco Giants in baseball and San Francisco 49ers in football. I don't know why I had always assumed that it was some sort of AI, like the old MS-DOS Dr. Spatzo program, which that'll be a segment on a podcast coming up, those old DOS games. So the commentary always made it more fun. The changing weather always made it more fun. You could have it be random, like dealer's choice weather, or you could force it to be snow or rain. I loved playing in the snow. I don't know why. It really didn't change how the game was played. But I used to love it when it would be a weather game and the announcer would say either it's beginning to snow or it's starting to let up, and it would just keep going back and forth. It would never stop. Well, occasionally it would stop, but it was usually snowing heavier, snowing lighter, and he would just keep saying it in the same way. So you'd pick your play, offense, defense, and they'd have the quarterback calling signals.
The quarterback brings them out of the huddle. New York in the 3-4. The offense lines up. Calls the signal. He's sacked back at the 35-yard line.
And the commentator doing his pre-snap play-by-play. And either when the running back crossed the line of scrimmage or when the quarterback would throw it, then the camera would zoom in. And the graphics were great for the time. Yeah, if you go looking back at it now with the lens of 2023 games, it's not going to look as great. Another funny thing was, even though it was officially licensed by the NFL and NFLPA, and you had the real teams and you could play in the real Super Bowl, the only player that had a name was Joe Montana. So if you played as the 49ers, the announcer would say, Montana back to pass. But every other person was the quarterback, the running back, the receiver. So it wasn't perfect. Although in NFL 94, Troy Aikman was also given a name, likely due to the fact that the Cowboys were starting a dynasty, winning 3 Super Bowls in a row. This game really front-loaded the technology into the announcing and the graphics, so there wasn't much room left for celebrations being exciting, or the halftime show, the Super Bowl halftime show. It's like nobody cared to do that. Even winning the Super Bowl was a very disappointing celebration. I remember being so excited finally playing and winning the Super Bowl, and it was kind of like, well, that's it. All right. And there was no franchise mode. You didn't carry over your team or your seasons or draft. But back then, we didn't know. That wasn't technology that was there yet. So I played the hell out of this game. The announcing would always make me laugh. One of my favorite things that would happen on the game is you could do replay if you had some big play you wanted to see. And there were certain cues for the announcer, points in the play where he would say something. So if you slowed down the replay, you could get it to where all these cues would come out at once. So it would go from silence as you went frame by frame to then him saying like 10 things all at once that just would make me laugh. And then you'd make big mistakes, fumble it, and he'd go, "Oh no, what a mistake." Or when you drop a pass, he dropped it. Or you could make him say stuff if you went for a field goal, like a 70-yard field goal on second down. He'd just say, "I can't believe it. What a mistake." Those calls from him are still implanted in my head 30 years later. How he pronounced certain teams, Cowboys. He would say it kind of like that. Every team would have a nickname. The Patriots would also be called the Pats. The 49ers would be the Niners. I used to laugh like he was trying to be friends with the teams. The gameplay was relatively simple because you had a Sega Genesis controller that just had the directional pad and the ABC buttons. So you could make your running back go faster like a burst of speed, or the quarterback, if you press the button harder, he'd throw the ball harder. Or you could juke and spin. You couldn't really make the receivers catch the ball. You just had to hope it was there. Like you couldn't control the receiver to get him to go up for a ball. The next year, NFL 94 was even better. That might have been my most played game ever on Sega. So even though the announcer would only call Montana and Aikman, all the other players had their names and numbers, which made it feel so much more realistic. I'll let you be the judge if the music from NFL 94 was better. NFL 94 improved the graphics and the gameplay, the camera angles. I can't imagine how many hours I played that game. Hundreds and hundreds for sure. And then NFL 95, which still had Joe Montana on the cover with his Kansas City Chiefs uniform. That was the last one in the series. I had that. I played the hell out of that. But the big difference with this game that didn't ruin it, but definitely changed it, was they got rid of the play-by-play. I wanted to hear the announcer say, "Better hurry," or "Oh no, he dropped it," or "What a mistake." I was kind of sad. They made up for it, though, by bringing in free agency into the game, which was fun because I could try to cheat the system and just sign every free agent I could. Even though it was highly rated, by this point, Madden Football had surpassed it. So I think Sega Genesis saw the writing on the wall. The next football game that came out for Sega Genesis was Primetime Football, which would have been NFL 96, starring Deion Sanders. But by this point, I had switched over to Madden and I had a PlayStation. Any of you out there play the old NFL football games for Sega Genesis? They were so much fun. Growing up back then, those games were cutting edge. The announcing was so much fun. So funny. I'm glad I could share bits and pieces of it here. I think I might go check online if there's one of those emulators so I can load up NFL 94 and hear the old voice announcing. Or maybe just find a YouTube video with clips of it. That's kind of how I got a lot of this to share with you on the podcast here. But yes, compared to football games and games in general of today, NFL Sports Talk Football is not that great. But for us, people from the 90s, it was definitely an awesome experience.